You know someone like this. They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they check it. Sometimes every single day. But you have never, not once, seen them post anything. No birthday photos, no opinions, no life updates, just silence. And for a long time, most people assumed something was wrong with them. Maybe they were shy. Maybe they had nothing interesting to say. Maybe they just didn't understand how it worked. Here is what the data actually reveals. 9 out of 10 people on social media never post publicly. That is not a fringe behavior. That is the majority. And according to research on what separates these people from the rest of us, the psychological profile that emerges is not what anyone expected. These aren't the people who got left behind by social media. They are the ones who figured it out first. To understand what is really happening here, you have to understand what social media was designed to do. In 1959, a sociologist named Erving Goffman published a theory that would later read like a prophecy. He argued that all human social interaction is essentially a performance. We present a version of ourselves, curated, controlled, calculated, based on who is watching. Goffman called it impression management. He was describing dinner parties and job interviews. But decades later, the architects of Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok built his entire theory into a product and handed it to 4 billion people. Every post is an audition. Every caption is a script. Every photo is a costume. And here is what the data says about what that costs us. A study published in JAMA Network Open found that reducing social media use by just 1 week dropped anxiety by 16% and depression by 24%. Not quitting forever. 1 week. Now ask yourself, what does it mean that the people who never perform at all, who never stepped onto that stage, have been avoiding that cost for years? Because here is the part nobody talks about. The silent ones were not passive. They made a choice. And psychology has a great deal to say about what kind of person makes that choice and why. Research from Northeastern University identified something that should have reshaped the entire cultural conversation around social media behavior. Up to 90% of users are what researchers call lurkers. They consume content, they observe, they watch, but they leave no trace. 90%. The group we treat as the abnormal minority is actually the silent majority. The vocal 10%, the posters, the influencers, the daily updaters, are the statistical outlier. And yet everything we know about social media psychology, every think piece, every study, every cultural critique has been built around that 10%. The lurkers were never studied as the subject. They were treated as the background. So what actually defines these people psychologically? Multiple studies converge on the same core traits. Silent social media users tend to score high on what psychologists call introspective orientation, the preference for processing internally before acting externally. They are information collectors. They observe social patterns with the kind of precision most people never develop because most people are too busy performing to notice what is actually happening. There is a term for this, observational intelligence, and researchers link it directly to social intelligence, the ability to read rooms, understand motivations, and anticipate behavior. Picture it this way. At a dinner party, 2 types of people exist, the one who talks the most and the one who listens so carefully that 3 weeks later, they remember something you mentioned in passing that even you had forgotten. Non-posters tend to be the second person. They are not disengaged. They are paying a different kind of attention, one that leaves no footprint but misses almost nothing. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. The platforms know this. The word used most commonly to describe non-posters is lurker. It sounds vaguely predatory, like someone hiding in shadows. That language is not accidental. Social media platforms are architecturally engineered to make silence feel like a social failure. Empty profiles carry a subtle stigma. Algorithms surface content to reward interaction. Notifications nudge you toward posting. Every design decision in these products pushes users toward performance, because a performing user generates data, engagement, and advertising revenue in ways a silent observer never does. The counterintuitive truth is this: the behavior that platforms are designed to discourage is the one that psychologists are increasingly identifying as the healthier one. A 2024 study published in Frontiers in Psychology drew a crucial distinction. Not all passive social media use is the same. Compulsive, comparison-driven scrolling, the kind where you are measuring your life against a highlight reel of everyone else's, that produces negative outcomes. But what they called intentional lurking, purposeful, privacy-driven, curiosity-directed observation produced positive psychological results. There is also a neurological dimension that almost no one discusses. Neuroimaging research has found that posting on social media activates the brain's reward centers in patterns similar to gambling. The unpredictability of likes, comments, and shares, whether the post will land or disappear, creates the same dopamine loop that keeps people returning to slot machines. People who do not post have, largely without knowing it, opted out of that loop entirely. Ask yourself this: if posting activates the same neurological circuitry as gambling addiction, then what does it mean that the people society labeled as passive were simply never addicted in the first place? Stay with me, because what comes next is the part that nobody talks about. Here is what all of this points toward. The people who never post on social media were not failing to engage with the modern world. They were engaging with it differently, through observation, not performance, through absorption, not broadcast, through a sense of identity that does not require an audience to validate it. Psychology describes this as low approval-seeking behavior. Their self-worth is not tethered to external metrics. They do not need a number next to a heart icon to confirm that something they experienced was real or meaningful. Research in personality psychology consistently finds that this trait, security that exists independent of public recognition, is associated with stronger, more stable emotional foundations. The world was told that the people who post are the ones who matter, the ones driving culture, the ones with influence, the active participants. The reality is that the people who never post have been watching that performance from the outside, and from that vantage point, they see it with a clarity that the performers never can. They are not the ones who got left behind by social media. They are the ones who never let it convince them that performing was the same as living. This is not just a profile of quiet people online. Right now, a generation is growing up with no memory of a world before social media performance. The pressure to document, share, and quantify every experience begins earlier than ever. And the mental health data emerging from that pressure is not ambiguous. What the psychology of non-posters reveals is a template, not for withdrawal, but for reclaiming the distinction between what you experience and what you perform. Most people will never question whether the version of themselves they broadcast online is actually them, or whether they built their identity around an audience instead of around something real. Now you can see that distinction, and that changes how you watch everything that happens online from this moment forward. 9 out of 10 people on social media are watching in silence. Most of them have never had a name for what they were doing, or any idea that it said something this specific about who they are. If this felt like something worth knowing, help us find the next story that isn't being told. Next time, we go deeper into the psychology of people who go quiet in social situations, not because they have nothing to say, but because of something far more interesting happening underneath. The quiet ones always have the most to reveal.